There is a pot of water on your stove. You measured the rice, poured it in, and turned on the heat. Or you pressed the button on your rice cooker. Or you put the pouch in the microwave. However you do it, you have done this hundreds of times. Rice is the side dish that requires almost no thought. It is the base of the bowl, the starch at the center of dinner, the most consumed grain on the planet. 6 days ago, Consumer Reports published the results of the most comprehensive rice safety investigation conducted in the United States in over a decade. They bought 52 rice products from store shelves: white rice, brown rice, basmati, jasmine, sushi, arborio, parboiled, microwavable, seasoned. They sent 142 samples to a specialized laboratory. They tested every sample for 4 heavy metals: arsenic, cadmium, mercury, and lead. Arsenic was detected in every single sample tested, not most of them, every one. And in 42% of those products, the average inorganic arsenic levels were high enough that an adult eating just 1 serving a day over time would have a significantly increased risk of skin cancer, bladder cancer, and type 2 diabetes. Those are the words of James Rogers, PhD, Director of Food Safety at Consumer Reports, not mine. I want to show you what that means for the specific products in your kitchen, why the distinction between 2 types of arsenic matters enormously for how worried you should actually be, and what 3 specific changes to how you buy and cook rice, one of which costs nothing and takes about 30 extra seconds, reduce your exposure by more than half. Stay with me, because the third one is something almost no one talking about this story has mentioned. Consumer Reports has tested rice for arsenic before. They first did it in 2012. They followed up in 2014. Both times they found arsenic. Both times they asked the FDA to set limits. Both times the FDA did not. This year's investigation is the 3rd time. The results show the problem has not improved. The Director of Food Safety at Consumer Reports described finding measurable levels of inorganic arsenic in all samples as something they found just as they did more than a decade ago. This is not a new contamination event. There was no industrial accident, no supply chain failure, no unusual source of pollution that entered the rice supply last month. Inorganic arsenic has been in rice for decades. It enters the plant through soil and water, absorbed during the growing process in flooded paddies where arsenic naturally concentrates. It cannot be washed off the outside of the grain because it is not on the outside. It is inside the grain itself. The specific brands that tested highest in Consumer Reports' investigation included Carolina Gold Extra Long Grain Parboiled Rice at 108 parts per billion for white rice, and Mahatma Jasmine Brown Thai Fragrant Whole Grain Rice at 155 parts per billion for brown rice. Ben's Original Long Grain and Wild Rice Seasoned Side Dish came in at 167 parts per billion, the highest of all the boxed products tested. The FDA has an action level for inorganic arsenic in infant rice cereal, 100 parts per billion. That limit exists because the FDA set it in 2020 after decades of advocacy. For adult rice products, the rice on your dinner plate, no equivalent limit exists. The FDA was contacted by Consumer Reports for comment on this investigation. The agency did not respond. I want to explain why inorganic arsenic specifically is the term that matters here, because arsenic in food sounds alarming, and the distinction changes everything about how to interpret the finding. Arsenic exists in 2 primary forms. Organic arsenic, despite its name, is the less harmful form. It is naturally present in seafood and some plants and is processed by the body relatively efficiently. Inorganic arsenic is different. It is classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as a Group 1 carcinogen, the same classification as tobacco smoke and asbestos. That means there is sufficient evidence in humans to establish that inorganic arsenic causes cancer, not probably causes. The specific cancers associated with chronic inorganic arsenic exposure are skin cancer and bladder cancer. The metabolic condition associated with it is type 2 diabetes. The concern with rice is not eating a bowl tonight. It is eating high arsenic rice regularly over years or decades. Chronic, low-level, cumulative exposure is the pattern that produces the health outcomes in the research. That is a reason to make specific changes to a long-term habit, which is different from a reason to panic about last night's dinner. Here is where most coverage of this story stops being as useful as it could be. The headline arsenic found in all 52 rice products tested is accurate. It is also, without the next layer of context, more alarming than the data justifies. Not all 52 products are equivalent concerns. Consumer Reports established this directly. The investigation found substantial variation between product types and brands. Basmati and sushi rice tested lower than other varieties. White rice contains less inorganic arsenic than brown rice of the same type, because arsenic concentrates in the outer bran layer removed during milling. Brown rice has more nutritional value in that same bran layer, so these are not the same trade-off in every direction. Rice grown in certain regions also tests differently. California-grown rice and rice from Southeast Asia, Thai jasmine, and Indian basmati consistently tested lower than rice grown in parts of the American South and Midwest, particularly Arkansas and Louisiana, where soil arsenic concentrations are historically higher due to prior agricultural land use. The products Consumer Reports identified as lowest risk tell you something directly. Royal Basmati tested at 32 parts per billion, the lowest of all white rice products. Lotus Foods, organic brown basmati tested at 53 parts per billion, the lowest of all brown rice. Lundberg, the California brand, had 4 of its 5 tested products below 100 parts per billion. Several other brands did not respond at all to Consumer Reports' questions. The story is not all rice is equally contaminated. It is that arsenic levels vary significantly by type, brand, and origin, and your choices within the category meaningfully affect your exposure. Here's the regulatory picture that explains why a nonprofit is doing this investigation rather than the government. The FDA has had the authority and data to set inorganic arsenic limits for adult rice for over a decade. The precedent exists. Between 2011 and 2013, 64% of tested infant rice cereals exceeded 100 parts per billion. After the FDA set that action level in 2020, the figure dropped to 24%. Setting the limit worked. For adult rice, no equivalent standard exists. Consumer Reports contacted the FDA about this investigation. The agency did not respond. That is the same non-response the organization received in 2012 and 2014. 13 years. Same answer. Here is where this story shifts from a brand comparison to something immediately more useful. The variation between brands matters, but it matters less than a single choice you make in your kitchen before the water even boils. Consumer Reports tested 3 cooking methods alongside their product analysis. The standard absorption method, measuring water into the pot, cooking until absorbed with no draining, was their control. The results of the other methods were specific. Agitating rice in water for 5 minutes before cooking in fresh water. 5% reduction, not worth the extra step. Soaking for 30 minutes before cooking in fresh water. Similar, also not significant. The third method, parboiling the rice in a large volume of water for 5 minutes, draining that water completely. Then finishing the rice in fresh water on lower heat until absorbed. Inorganic arsenic reduction in short and long grain rice, both white and brown, 50 to 58%. More than half the arsenic goes down the drain with the water you discard. This is the most effective single intervention available to anyone who eats rice, and it requires no special equipment, no specialty products, no change of brand. It requires cooking rice differently than you probably do right now. Let me say this plainly, because this story deserves precision more than reassurance. Inorganic arsenic is a Group 1 carcinogen. It has been detected in every rice product in the most comprehensive recent testing in the United States. In 42% of those products, a single daily serving carries meaningful cumulative cancer risk over time. The FDA has not set a limit for adult rice products despite 13 years of evidence and advocacy. None of this means the rice you ate last night harmed you. Chronic cumulative exposure over years is the concern, not any individual meal. Rice is not uniquely dangerous compared to other dietary cancer risks, but the exposure is not random. It varies measurably by product type, growing region, and cooking method. The intervention is not burdensome. It does not require replacing rice. It requires cooking it differently, and the FDA precedent shows that when a limit is set, it works. You are not waiting for that limit to protect yourself. 3 changes, ranked by how much they matter. First and highest impact, change how you cook rice. The parboiling and absorption method reduced inorganic arsenic by 50 to 58% in Consumer Reports testing. Bring a large pot of water to a boil. Add rice. Cook for 5 minutes. Drain every drop. Return rice to the pot with fresh water, roughly 2 parts water to 1 part rice. Cook on lower heat, covered until absorbed. The arsenic leaches into the first water during the initial boil. When you drain it, you discard more than half your exposure. This works for white and brown rice. 1 extra step, 1 extra pour. Second, choose lower arsenic varieties and origins. Basmati, Thai jasmine, California-grown rice, and sushi rice all tested significantly lower than other varieties. Brown rice has more arsenic than white rice of the same type, though it also has more of the nutrients in the bran layer. Knowing this lets you make an informed choice about that trade-off. Third, vary your grain consumption. Quinoa, oats, and barley carry substantially lower arsenic loads than rice. This does not mean eliminating rice. It means a diet where rice is the only grain every day carries more cumulative exposure than one where it is one of several grains across the week. Consumer Reports specifically recommends this diversification alongside cooking method changes. One additional note for households with young children: children are at higher relative exposure than adults because of their body size. The same cooking method changes apply, and variety selection matters proportionally more. Here is something that did not appear in any of the mainstream coverage of the Consumer Reports investigation this week. In 2015, researchers at Queen's University Belfast published a study in the journal PLOS One on an unusual cooking method they had tested for arsenic reduction. They ran rice through a coffee maker, not as a novelty experiment, but as a controlled test of what happens when hot water passes continuously through rice rather than sitting with it in a pot. The result: 85% arsenic reduction. Compared to the 50 to 58% from parboiling, the continuous percolating action of a coffee maker, where fresh hot water flows over the rice in a constant stream, removes substantially more arsenic than any static cooking method. This is not the recommended daily method for everyone. A rice cooker is faster and more practical for most households. But for anyone managing high arsenic rice exposure, or anyone who wants maximum arsenic reduction without special equipment, a standard drip coffee maker used without any coffee produces measurably better outcomes than the best standard cooking alternatives. The lead researcher said at publication, "This is a very significant breakthrough as this offers an immediate solution to decreasing inorganic arsenic in the diet." That was 10 years ago. This week, when one of the largest rice safety investigations in American history was published, that method was not mentioned in a single mainstream news segment I reviewed. You are hearing it here. But there is still a pot of water on your stove. Same rice, same kitchen, same dinner. The only thing that changed is what happens between now and the moment you sit down. A large pot of boiling water instead of a small one. 5 minutes, a drain, fresh water, another 10 minutes. The arsenic that was going into that bowl goes down the sink instead. More than half of it, based on Consumer Reports' own testing of that exact method. You did not need a new brand. You did not need to stop eating rice. You needed one piece of information that the FDA had the authority to give you years ago and chose not to, that Consumer Reports published 6 days ago and barely anyone translated into a single actionable kitchen change, and that a research team in Belfast figured out a decade ago and saw disappear from the conversation. That is why this channel exists. The information is in the record. It just needs someone to read it. If you want the next one, subscribing is how you get it. I will see you in the next video.